Some people are famous for the integrity they manage to maintain in Hollywood. But Mel Gibson is famous for making mistakes so serious that all of Hollywood turned its back on him. He was once a man who won 2 Oscars, directed a religious film rejected by every major studio, yet still grossed over $600 million. With a massive fortune, it's no surprise he lived like royalty in a $14 million Malibu mansion and even once owned a private island hidden in the Pacific. But that same man was erased from Mad Max, lost his friends, his career, and disappeared from the film industry for nearly a decade. Mel Gibson didn't apologize with words. He chose to rise through action. Through films that even major studios like Warner Brothers and 20th Century Fox didn't dare to make, only to reap the kind of success they could only envy. This isn't just the story of a fallen star. It's the story of a man who rebuilt his kingdom from ashes in silence. Would you dare to leave everything behind at the age of 12? Step into a foreign land with just a few coins in your pocket, chasing a dream of stage lights so distant that no one believes you'll ever reach them? This isn't just a story of poverty, but a conflicted journey of a boy torn between duty and ambition. And it was in those seemingly hopeless days that the seeds were sown for someone who would one day rise to the peak of Hollywood. Mel Columcille Gerard Gibson was born on January 3, 1956, in Peekskill, a small, quiet town in New York. The 6th of 11 children, Mel grew up in a rundown house where the concept of privacy didn't exist. He shared a bed, wore his older siblings' hand-me-downs, and waited his turn for the single bathroom on freezing winter mornings. Dinner was often a simple stew, and whatever dreams Mel had came second to crying babies and unpaid bills. Mel's father, Hutton Gibson, a sharp-minded but deeply conservative writer, had once worked for the railroad. A workplace injury threw the family into financial hardship. His mother, Anne, a devout Irish Catholic, taught her children that work and family responsibility came before any luxurious dream like art. While stars like Tom Hanks were growing up in the relative stability of California, Mel was struggling every day in Peekskill and later Sydney, where every step forward was a battle to prove himself. From a young age, Mel was drawn to the world of theater. But whenever he spoke of wanting to be an actor, his family responded with skepticism and silence. To most, becoming an artist was unthinkable for a working-class kid. And in a family as large as the Gibsons, reality always spoke louder than dreams. In 1968, when Mel turned 12, everything changed. His father received a $145,000 settlement from a workplace injury lawsuit. Fearing his sons would be drafted for the Vietnam War, he decided to move the entire family to Sydney, Australia, carrying both fear and hope across the ocean. But a new land wasn't a promised land. With no friends or relatives, the Gibson family struggled to adjust. Mel, with his unfamiliar American accent, quickly became a target at school. Taunts from classmates and coldness from teachers made him withdraw. He later shared that for a long time he felt like an alien, no longer belonging in Peekskill, but still unaccepted in Australia. Teased for how he spoke, he learned to hide pain behind smiles. Silence became his only shield. To help support the family, Mel took on all kinds of work, delivering milk at dawn, hauling crates in warehouses, even cleaning construction sites. At times, the financial pressure made him think a full-time job might be more realistic than continuing school. But one high school teacher, someone who saw something different in Mel's eyes, encouraged him to pursue the arts. And then, a door opened. At 17, Mel applied to and was accepted by the National Institute of Dramatic Art, NIDA, one of Australia's most prestigious acting schools. There, he studied alongside Judy Davis, who would later become one of the country's finest actors. While others partied, Mel buried himself in scripts, voice training, and Shakespeare, often studying late in his rundown dorm room. For him, NIDA wasn't just a school. It was a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. His first role in Summer City, 1977, didn't bring fame. He earned just a few $100s. The film was quickly forgotten. But for Mel, it was proof that the stage was no longer a mirage, that if he kept his feet steady, he could go farther than anyone who'd ever doubted him. From those early days, Mel learned that dreams don't come easy, but even a single spark, like that first role in Summer City, could be fanned into a blaze bright enough for Hollywood. Some people choose safety. They accept their fate. Mel didn't. In a world that never made it easy for those who had nothing, he chose to believe in the impossible and began to walk, even if only with bare feet. What happens when a role no one expected turns a poor boy from peak skill into a global star? Mel Gibson had no backing, no connections in Hollywood, and none of the polished looks of stars at the time. But he had one thing money couldn't buy: the burning gaze of someone who had lived in the shadows. In 1979, at the age of 23, Mel stepped onto the set of Mad Max with a bruised face. The night before his audition, he'd gotten into a bar fight. That battered look caught director George Miller's eye, who then invited him to audition for the role of Max Rokitansky, a cop in a post-apocalyptic world. With a modest budget of just $350,000, few believed the film would go anywhere. But Mad Max exploded, grossing over $100 million worldwide, becoming the most profitable independent film of its time. From a boy delivering milk at dawn in Sydney, Mel now stood before the camera with a look that commanded the world's attention. Unlike Harrison Ford, who had already carved a place in Hollywood, Mel was an unknown Australian, once-a-day laborer struggling to get by. His Australian accent was dubbed over for the US release. Hollywood wasn't ready for a star from elsewhere with a foreign tone. But his eyes, the same eyes that once stayed silent in school hallways in Sydney, that stared at cracked mirrors in cramped peak-skill bathrooms, made people unable to look away. After Mad Max, Mel starred in Gallipoli, 1981, a war film rich in humanity, directed by Peter Weir. His performance earned him the Best Actor award from the Australian Film Institute. Not because he was more glamorous than others, but because he made audiences believe the pain was real. By 1987, he entered the ranks of action stars with the role of Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon, a reckless, tormented cop carrying loss and grief. This wasn't just an action film. It was where Mel poured his own pain, the years of isolation in Australia, the doubts about where he belonged, into every line, every look. His salary soared to $25 million per film, putting him in the same league as Bruce Willis and Tom Cruise at their peak. But while Bruce symbolized action, Mel brought raw emotion to roles typically reserved for muscle and firepower. Still, Mel didn't want to just stand in front of the camera. He wanted to own the story. In 1995, he directed and starred in Braveheart, the epic tale of William Wallace, the Scottish hero who rebelled against English rule. With a $72 million budget, the film earned over $210 million and won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Director and Best Picture. It was the moment Mel Gibson evolved from talented actor to cinematic icon. Behind the scenes, not everyone believed in him. Mel once shared that before the film's release, whispers floated around. He thinks he's some big-time director now? But he didn't need to defend himself. Braveheart spoke for him. And then he took an even bolder leap, a gamble no one else dared to take. In 2004, Mel did the unthinkable. He invested $45 million of his own money to produce The Passion of the Christ. The film had no major stars, was performed in Aramaic, Latin, and Hebrew, choices Hollywood deemed insane. Studios refused to distribute it, but Mel believed in his vision. The result? The film grossed over $611 million worldwide. Mel personally earned between $400 million and $475 million from box office profits, DVDs, and merchandising. A massive risk, but one of the greatest successes in the history of independent cinema. And that was the turning point. From a boy who once considered dropping out of school due to financial pressure, Mel Gibson had reached the point where he could invest tens of millions in his own projects and reap tenfold in return. His success didn't come from luck. It was forged in years of rejection, skepticism, and choices that defied the current of Hollywood. Yet, the journey wasn't without scars. In 1984, Mel was arrested for drunk driving in Toronto and had his license suspended for 3 months. The incident passed quickly, but it foreshadowed bigger storms ahead, as you'll see later. At the time, his talent was still big enough to overshadow his missteps. Mel Gibson never walked a paved road. He carved his own path, with sweat, risk, and wounds that never fully healed. That unshakable will earned him not only golden statues, but also a financial empire and a lavish lifestyle. The next chapter will take you further into that world. From a boy delivering milk at dawn to a man who could sign million-dollar checks on a whim, Mel Gibson turned every limitation into a launch pad. And this journey, even now, shows no signs of stopping. If you've ever lived in a cramped house with 10 siblings, you'd understand why Mel Gibson doesn't just buy homes. He builds entire worlds for himself. Each estate, each car, each indulgence he chooses isn't meant for the crowd. They exist for someone like him alone, unique and irreplaceable. Malibu Estate, a power play with nature. Perched on a seaside hill along Carbon Mesa Road, Mel Gibson's Malibu Estate is the perfect marriage of wilderness and dominance. He bought it in 2008 for $14.5 million, but everyone who has set foot there says it's priceless. The house spans over 5,400 square feet, with 6 bedrooms, ancient stone hallways, rustic oak interiors, and a giant stone chessboard in the middle of the lawn. Not meant for play, but as a metaphor. Mel is a man who always thinks several moves ahead. An organic garden lies next to a glass greenhouse where he once grew vegetables and tended to plants as a form of therapy. A tennis court, walking trails, and an ocean-facing balcony evoke the image of a reclusive lord. Someone who understands that real power doesn't shout. No visible security cameras, no grand statues, yet every brick speaks the one thing Hollywood fears most: a silence that's calculated. This estate was destroyed in the 2025 wildfires. But for those who visited, it remains a symbol, not of luxury, but of a man who turned solitude into strength. Playa Barragona, a hidden realm in the rainforest. On the untouched shores of Costa Rica's Nicoya Peninsula, Mel Gibson doesn't own a mansion. He owns a private world, over 400 acres wide. Purchased in 2007 for $26 million, Playa Barragona isn't a place to live. It's a place to disappear. 3 white Mediterranean-style villas rise from the rainforest like ancient temples. Towering ceilings, windows that open to the sky, warm red tile floors. Each villa has a private path to the beach. A beach with no name on any tourist map. Each morning, Mel walks barefoot along the white sands. No shoes, no bodyguards. The kitchen doesn't feature modern stainless steel, but solid stone and real fire, like he's living in a past century, far removed from everything that made him famous. At one point, Mel tried to sell the property for $35 million, but no one bought it. Maybe because to him, this isn't real estate. It's the last sanctuary of an artist who craves silence. Mago Island, the domain of a man who refuses to be seen. In the heart of the Pacific Ocean, far from international airports and TV cameras, Mel Gibson owns Mago Island, a 5,400-acre private isle he purchased for $15 million in 2004. It's not a billionaire's playground for entertaining guests. It's a retreat in the truest sense. No paved roads, no resort-style mansions, no gleaming yachts. Just a few simple wooden huts with thatched roofs for staff and one main house built like an old farm, modest, durable, and wholly unpretentious. Mel doesn't invite the press. No photos, no fanfare. In a rare moment, he once said, "On the island, I don't have to be anyone. That's all I need." No social media, no applause. Mago is where Mel doesn't have to act, doesn't need to defend himself, and doesn't owe anyone an answer. Old Mill Farm, an American castle with a European soul in Greenwich, Connecticut, a haven for CEOs and America's elite. Mel Gibson once owned Old Mill Farm, a historic 1926 English-style estate. He bought it for $9 million and sold it for $40 million in 2007, a profitable exit, but also a deliberate step back. Old Mill Farm is unlike any Hollywood mansion. 15 bedrooms, 12 Tudor fireplaces, gray stone stables, French rose gardens, and a 2-story library with stained glass windows reminiscent of a European chapel. Arched ceilings, marble hallways, every piece of furniture was restored, not replaced, as if Mel wanted to preserve the past, not erase it. If Mago Island is a retreat, Old Mill Farm was a statement. He understood glory, but chose not to live in it, perhaps because he knew what it was like to be devoured by it. Agoura Hills, the draft for a freer life before Mago, before Costa Rica. Mel Gibson lived on a 500-plus acre ranch in Agoura Hills, California, where Hollywood fades into the wild. No lavish mansion, just a rustic wooden house, a self-designed horse stable, rusted wire fences, and dirt roads that led into the woods. Here, Mel spent his downtime, riding horses, chopping wood, grilling over real charcoal, sometimes fixing doors by hand, sometimes writing scripts on the porch as the sun went down. The ranch was eventually sold, but to those close to him, it was the first place where Mel tried living as an ordinary man and discovered that he was still himself. More than just houses, Mel sees his cars as extensions of his soul. Each one doesn't just move, it tells a story. 2009 Bentley Arnage. Mel Gibson dislikes flashiness. His $250,000 Bentley Arnage proves it. Hand-stitched leather, mahogany trim, luxury that whispers instead of shouts. He often drove it to church, parked discreetly, stepping out like a hidden gentleman. To him, the Bentley isn't a car. It's a quiet declaration of control and composure. 1993 Mercedes-Benz 500EA, joint creation of Mercedes and Porsche. The 1993 500E was once a proud fixture in Mel's garage. Priced at around $80,000 when new, its real value to him was deeper. Every stitch handcrafted, like his career, meticulous, patient, and enduring. 2007 Maserati Quattroporte. At around $130,000, the Quattroporte isn't a car for rule followers. Ferrari engine, ferocious sound, angular Italian design. Mel loved it because it was like him. Wild but deep, powerful without being loud. Smart for two. Among his million-dollar garage, Mel also chose a $15,000 Smart for two. Small, discreet, convenient. He used it for groceries or quick trips when he didn't want to be seen. For Mel, simplicity isn't poverty. It's a choice. Lexus LS Mel has often been seen stepping out of a Lexus LS, Japan's elegant sedan, worth around $90,000. Not for show, but for peace. Quiet cabin, refined design. It's like a pause in a storm, made for someone who's seen both triumph and turbulence. Icon Productions. The empire behind the camera, beyond houses and cars, Mel Gibson's most valuable asset might be Icon Productions, the film company he founded in 1989. Independent of major studios, he used Icon to create Braveheart, The Passion of the Christ, Apocalypto, and more recently, Sound of Freedom. It's more than a company, it's freedom. Mel once said, "I don't need anyone's permission to tell a story." For him, that's a form of wealth beyond dollars. A collector of Renaissance art. Mel has a deep passion for religious Renaissance paintings. He admires works that evoke redemption and faith, like those of Caravaggio or Rubens. At his home, he once dedicated an entire room to replicas, with soft lighting and a lone chair, his personal chapel. For him, art is where the soul regains its balance. Writing scripts by hand. Instead of typing, Mel still handwrites his scripts, because the flow of ink on paper makes him feel more connected to the story. He often writes on the porch, blank pages in front of him, silence and nature behind. For him, handwriting is a sacred ritual. Private poker nights. Mel hosts quiet poker nights at home, just old friends from the business. No parties, no spotlight. There, he isn't a star, just a man who's fallen, risen, and now finds laughter in silent hands of cards. Horseback riding and living with nature. At his Agora Hills Ranch, Mel kept the habit of early morning horseback rides. No phone, no noise, just hoofbeats and wooden fences. Riding was his way of stepping away from Hollywood, simple, solitary, and real. Gardening. Mel personally tends his organic garden, planting, watering, weeding. For him, gardening isn't just a habit, it's a quiet therapy. In the soil, he finds what fame can't offer: humility. Looking at what he owns, one might think Mel Gibson is an absolute winner. But behind every luxury gate, every closed car door, every quiet poker night, stands a man who's faced rejection, criticism, and loss. His light once shone so fiercely, it nearly burned him. He was once the golden face of Hollywood, an Oscar-winning director, an A-list actor, a man who owned a private island and his own film empire. But all it takes is one night, one sentence, and one camera, and everything can come crashing down. For Mel Gibson, there were moments when the road back seemed impossible. DUI in 1984, the first sign of darkness. In 1984, Mel Gibson was arrested by Toronto police for driving under the influence and had his license suspended for 3 months. At the time, he was at the height of his fame, with the Mad Max and Lethal Weapon franchises in motion. The incident was quickly brushed aside by the media. Mel was still new, and his mistake seemed forgivable. But it was the first clear sign of his struggles with alcohol, which he later described as something that's always silently chased me from behind the curtain. Unlike Robert Downey Jr., who was publicly supported after his scandal, Mel chose silence. He withdrew to his ranch, stayed away from the press, and never mentioned the incident, a classic response from someone who doesn't believe in quick forgiveness. The 2006 arrest, the biggest fall of his career. On July 28, 2006, Mel Gibson was arrested in Malibu for a second DUI. But this time, it wasn't just a traffic violation. When asked to take a breathalyzer test, Mel made a now infamous remark. "The Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world." The statement, recorded in the official police report, sparked global outrage. Hollywood turned its back on him, studios cut ties, he was dropped from Mad Max, Fury Road, and multiple production deals were shelved. His Malibu estate, once a symbol of his empire, now stood as a monument to his isolation. Unlike stars like Alec Baldwin or Charlie Sheen, who were eventually welcomed back into the fold, Mel Gibson became one of the rare cases labeled as unforgivable. The leaked calls and domestic violence allegations, 2010. Trying to maintain a low profile after the DUI fallout, Mel stayed out of the spotlight. But in 2010, a leaked phone call between him and ex-girlfriend Oksana Grigorieva escalated things further. In the recording, Mel was heard screaming, using racist slurs, threatening her life, and displaying signs of violence. He faced a criminal investigation, eventually pleaded no contest to misdemeanor battery, paid a $750,000 settlement, and had his gun rights suspended for a long period. Unlike actors with similar scandals who were given second chances, like Sean Penn or Johnny Depp, Mel was completely shut out of the mainstream. TV channels refused to air his films. Even the Malibu villa, once home to his private poker nights, became the place where he faded into the shadows. Accusations of bigotry. When the past came back. Around the same time, actress Winona Ryder claimed that Mel had made anti-Semitic and homophobic remarks to her at a party back in the 1990s. Though he denied it, the damage to his reputation deepened. GLAAD criticized Braveheart for its portrayal of King Edward II as stereotypically effeminate. Some began labeling Mel a symbol of outdated conservative values. In the era of the Me Too movement and growing social justice movements, Mel Gibson all but disappeared from Hollywood. The first steps toward redemption. When silence was the only option. Left after everything, Mel didn't publicly defend himself or go on talk shows. He checked into rehab, stepped away from the spotlight, and worked only with those who still believed in him. Like Jodie Foster, who cast him in The Beaver, 2011, even though the film didn't find success. The real turning point came in 2016 with Hacksaw Ridge, the true story of a soldier who refused to carry a weapon but saved dozens of lives during World War II. The film earned 6 Oscar nominations, grossed over $180 million, and marked the return of a quieter, more introspective Mel, whose creative fire had never truly gone out. Mel Gibson once sat at the very top, and then plunged to the bottom. But what sets him apart isn't that he didn't make mistakes, but that he chose to rise again in silence. And sometimes, that's the hardest way to survive. The question now is, will these efforts be enough for him to leave behind a legacy greater than the scars? When the spotlight fades, what remains? A fortune? A golden statue? Or the quiet acts that need no applause? For Mel Gibson, his legacy doesn't lie in awards, but in what he has silently left behind for the world. A cinematic legacy, from peak skill boy to film empire. From Mad Max to Lethal Weapon, from Braveheart to The Passion of the Christ, and Hacksaw Ridge, the total U.S. box office revenue of films bearing his imprint surpasses $2.5 billion, with billions more worldwide. From a cramped house in Peekskill, Mel Gibson built a cinematic empire that few would dare to dream of. He wasn't just a talented actor, he was a bold director and an independent producer. One of the rare figures in the industry recognized by both the Academy and audiences around the world. Not because he played by Hollywood's rules, but because he dared to tell stories no one else would touch. Icon Productions, a space of freedom. Amid Hollywood's chaos, founded in 1989, Icon Productions wasn't just a company, it was where Mel carved out his own artistic sanctuary, free from box office pressures. Icon produced deeply personal works such as Hamlet, Apocalypto, The Passion of the Christ, and more recently, Sound of Freedom. Unconcerned with trends, Icon stood as a banner of creative freedom, a model for young filmmakers seeking to forge their own path. A path not easy, but deeply meaningful. In an era where cinema is dictated by market charts and franchise formulas, Mel Gibson chose to hold on to what he believes is essential: truth in every frame, community and charity. When fame is used to heal. Though he shies away from the media spotlight, Mel Gibson has quietly given back to the community in many ways. He has supported healing the children, helping children in developing countries receive life-saving surgeries. After a film project in Singapore, he made significant contributions to local children with critical illnesses. In conservation, he has funded initiatives to protect Central American rainforests. In education, he's quietly backed scholarships and Catholic schools, a tribute to the institutions that shaped his earliest values. No interviews, no plaques, just action, and the quiet will of a man once given a chance, now passing that chance on to others. Family and life beyond the stage. A simple father. After all he's been through, Mel Gibson isn't trying to reclaim center stage. He chooses a quieter life with his partner Rosalind Ross and their young son, spending time writing, directing, and living close to nature. In places like Costa Rica or Mago Island in the South Pacific. He no longer seeks forgiveness from Hollywood. He seeks peace within himself. On rare occasions, he has said, in essence, "I don't want to explain the past. I just want to live truthfully with what remains." For him now, silence is no longer escape. It's a choice. Final message. Eat. A life after the storm. Mel Gibson is not a perfect man. He once stood at the summit, then fell hard due to his own mistakes. But he is living proof that a person can fall and still rise again. Through silence, through action, through the quiet resolve to do what's right. His legacy is not only in the films he made, but in the reminder that everyone deserves a second chance, so long as they have the courage to start over.